So today's guest at Keen on Yoga is Prashad Rangnekar. Welcome, Prashad, to Keen on Yoga. Thanks for
Thank you.
taking time.
Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you. I suppose the obvious place to start is the usual place of not being an Ashtanga yoga teacher. Would you like to give a little bit about your background and your perspective on yoga and how you got into it and how you teach?
I started with my yoga journey, as in, I would say, asana and pranayama journey, the physical practice journey at the age of 9, with a direct disciple of Kuvalayananda. My sister and I had a school break for a couple of months, and I don't know why, but my mother thought we should study yoga. So she had us recruited in a yoga course for 1 month, and we were the youngest.
Yeah.
And my sister was 13, I was 9, and all others were 50 and above. So we were like the apple of the eye of the class, and we were pampered. So that was a good motivation for us. But that is when I really started understanding movement of the body and the breath. So the awareness awareness on the body and the breath started coming into my system since then. But I also to give credit to my family upbringing. Like in India, people may not be actually doing physical yoga, but they are born into or they grow up with yogic principles.
Yeah. You still think
in that
nowadays.
sense, I mean, like if you ask me, did your parents do yoga? I would say no. But if you ask me, did my parents follow yogic principles? I would say yes. Yeah. So, I could say my mother was a quintessential karma yogi, and my father was a typical jnana yogi, always reflecting, always demolishing set ideas and notions. So somewhere that upbringing, then my mother started teaching us Bhagavad Gita, chanting. Don't ask me why. I asked my mother once and she said it's part of our culture. So good enough, but at least the fundamentals started being planted into us. And then as I grew up, 16, when I was 16, I had a major illness. I was bedridden for 3.5, 4 months. I had lost a lot of weight, so I had nowhere to go. And I just selected a book out of my family library, and that was a book on yoga, a general book on yoga, not physical yoga. But the first chapter I read was Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. I did not understand much, but it's just fascinated me, And then gradually things went on and on. It's a continuous journey. Then I met some of my teachers later in my life, and I was in late 20s and early 30s. Then I started going into silence. Mauna or silence practice is one of my major practices.
I think we'll come to that in a second, because I know you do these incredible retreats into silence for a number of months a year, which I think a lot of people would find terrifying, if not impossible. I'm going to encourage my wife to do one, actually. I think it should be fun and hard. But I want to ask you about the early days, because you mentioned other things I've listened to. Of you talking that you started to get into physical culture, you became a personal trainer.
Yes,
I thought that was interesting, and how that relates to your yoga experience. I also wanted to ask you about, at a certain point, I recognized you had a rebellion to your parents' ideologies, and didn't want to say the prayers anymore. And how that kind of dovetailed into your yoga experience. So maybe talk a little bit about how you kind of started to kind of develop
Adam, if you will have to prompt me like this, because in my head, spiritual development is very hazy. I don't remember these things. But good, you are prompting it.
Yeah.
So the funny part is my father was a bodybuilder and a wrestler.
Really?
Not professionally, but he was a lawyer, but he was also, and he was into it. So my mother introduced me to the physical practice of yogasana and pranayama. And my father initiated me into bodybuilding at the age of 16 and 17. So I got just, before that, bodybuilding was cool in India, or the fitness things was cool in India. My father had already taken me to the gym and instructed me on how to work out. And all that, I just want to point out here from the yogic perspective. I remember we never used to wear shoes in our gym, because there was a Hanuman temple in the gym.
Okay, right. You dropped a dumbbell in your foot or something?
No. No, but that was devotion is more important than dropping dumbbell on your foot.
Breaking your foot or anything. Well,
and
maybe I could just pause for a second and ask you a question, actually, because as I understand it, the bodybuilding aspect has always been very similar, very kind of synonymous in a way, or closely related to the asana, right? I mean, we look at in the Mysore Palace next door to Krishnamacharya. Goes there, and the brother of Bikram, the famous bodybuilder. So there's been some relationship.
Even before last 100 years, like the Surya Namaskar thing. Right? Like I remember, my father did not know much about Surya Namaskar as we do them. But he insisted, when he was training me in the first couple of months in the gym, he insisted that I do 100 namaskars before I touch a dumbbell. So what he meant was, it was as nowadays I heard this word, Hindu push-up.
Yes.
Yeah. So he used the term namaskar because he was a wrestler, and he used to go to these Indian wrestling schools, and the Indian wrestlers have always been doing
the dance
what
and the
they call namaskar, dandas. Dandas and namaskars. So from the physical culture of modern yoga asana culture derives a lot from physical culture of wrestling, and that goes back hundreds of years. I would say that. I mean, in fact, we have a very important saint in India called Samartha Ramdas from the 1600s. And he used to inspire people. He was a self-realized yogi, but he used to inspire people by his words of physical culture, like, gain strength. Because that was a time when the West, or at least the whole of India actually, was fighting against invaders, right? So
yes. I think, this line of thinking has been there certainly in the 1900s quite strongly to make a nation strong, build them up, not only culturally with the asana, with the yoga, but also physically with the bodybuilding. And someone like there's many people like Ramesh Dalsakar, who I can think of as well, he was a famous bodybuilder. He used to go.
Yes.
I often reflect on him when I saw him at his age. It's a tiny little man at that age, but when you see him when he's young, he's a big bodybuilder. And
actually, one of my grandfathers, not like actual grandfather, but my father's cousin, he was contemporary with Ramesh Balsekar on the bodybuilding competitive scene. So my father knew Ramesh Balsekar, not in the capacity as a Advaitin, but as a bodybuilder. So once when he was alive, I had gone to Ramesh Balsekar's satsang, and he asked me, where did you go? And I said, Ramesh Balsekar. He said, oh, the bodybuilder? I said, no, the Vedantin.
That's funny. For anyone that doesn't know, Ramesh Balsekar, I should have said, was a very famous kind of Advaita Vedanta, how do we call him? Enlightened kind of being who used to teach from a suburb in Mumbai. And I used to go see him, and it was an amazing experience going to satsang with him. So Prashad is in Mumbai, so he would have had the opportunity to go there, on a number of occasions, I imagine.
Just been once, but it was
just went once. You went once. I would have gone every week if I'd been there. I really liked him.
No, I used to like him, but that time I was not so much into Advaita Vedanta and Neo Vedanta. So I went to see him once, and that was it.
I suppose this kind of like would segue into another question, which is obviously we've got physical culture. At the heart, it's kind of almost inseparable from spiritual culture. Really, we're doing a holistic thing after all. Right? We have the gym in the heart of Greek philosophy. That it's taught in the gym originally. Socrates teaches out of the gym, right? Calls one of his books the gymnasium, right?
Yeah.
And there's a strong physical culture within the modern yoga context.
Yeah.
Got any other observations to say around asana and how maybe even we'll start off with your own journey and how you became kind of interested in yoga asana outside bodybuilding and why that was the case. In
my head, asana and bodybuilding were never opposed to each other.
Right.
Never. I mean, I used to do my asana practice and go and lift big because I was competitive bodybuilder. And even today, single most credit I give in my life for me to move towards understanding of the mind or meditation, I will give it to bodybuilding because my gym was very, very simple gym, very simple gym, and a lot of poor guys used to come there to train with hardly any meals. Sometimes I used to go with my gym partners post our workout and feed them. They were from a really, really lower section, income section of society.
Yeah.
And I would see this 50-kilo guys lift, hundreds of kilos on leg press and bench press. And I'm like, wow, where is their strength coming from? And even in my own training, I would see that I'm bench pressing 250, 275 at that age and that weight. So it was continuously niggling in my mind that where is my strength coming from? It cannot be the body of this 18-year-old, 19-year-old boy. So what is the locus of my strength? And what happens? Why does my mind completely go shut when I am under a 275, 300-pound bench press? So that kind of pushed me to explore the mind. So that natural movement towards mental exploration happened, I would say, under a barbell rather than on the mat.
But then you did seek out asana. At some point, you sought out asana teachers to teach you yoga asana, right?
I still do teach. I mean, I've not stopped teaching asana.
No.
Pre-pandemic days, I still teach. Given a chance, I will still teach.
What was the reason for you to get into yoga asana then, as opposed to just keep continuing with the weights?
I got into yoga asana because my mother put me in the school, but I never really thought that if I do yoga asana, I should stop bodybuilding.
Yeah.
See, this is what I'm saying. For me, yoga asana was complete in itself, and bodybuilding was what it was. You see, I never saw them as something different. So asana practice for me and bodybuilding was both of these physical practices was me an entry into my mind. You see, so they were always, for some reason, perhaps I was taught it that way. The asana is not purely physical stuff. It's an entry level journey, or it's an entry gate to the deeper explorations of the mind. So I used both. To.
Yeah, I suppose I could reframe the question maybe in a clearer manner. Are they the same thing? Can you do the same thing that you're doing in yoga asana in the weights? Is it simply a concentration of the mind, or is there anything energetic, particularly in the yoga asana? And people, like to try and trace the roots to something involving a more tantric exploration of the body. You're using the breath and the bandhas in a certain manner to do something a little bit more complicated than simply in the Patanjalian idea of mind stability or mind focus? Is there anything else going on for you in asana?
If we look at Gheran Samhita, the reason why asana is done according to Gheran Samhita is stability, sthirata. And I see the same stability coming from weight training, resistance training. Yeah. Of course, a deeper practice of asana will move you into the deeper recesses of mind moving through the nadis and prana. If you apply bandha and all that, that will happen. That I explored also once I quit competitive bodybuilding. You see, so when I quit competitive bodybuilding, my focus on lifting big was less, and I spent more time on exploring the subtle elements of physical culture through asana. So if you ask me, none of the physical modalities, even dance, though I don't dance, any physical modality can be channeled towards exploration of the mind. And I have always looked at it that way. For me, asana was never about stretching. It was never about getting into the posture. For me, it was always about what happens when I'm moving from point A to point B in a particular posture. It was always like that. Perhaps that was how I was taught. And that's why I took the same orientation into bodybuilding. Yeah, so I was not just lifting big. I was watching myself, what is happening in my mind when I am lifting big. So there was always the, observer, as we say, behind the activities that I did.
So would you say that's your approach to asana? I mean, what is your approach to asana? Why are you teaching it? And how do you qualify the asana in relation to anything other? How does the asana fit into you as a gateway or as part of a bigger picture?
My orientation of teaching asana is has matured to looking at asana as number one, bringing the awareness into the physical body, because people in our times are too distracted. The awareness is very much outside of the body. It's not even in the body, So asana can be a beautiful modality to bring the distracted, scattered awareness into the body. At least at the surface level, at least at the muscle level. Once it is there, then shutting your eyes and the whole proprioceptive aspect, tapping into the deeper proprioceptive aspect, where you are not ruled by this is how the posture should be and this is how the alignment should be. After a while, the posture becomes an inner journey. And for me, in fact, next month I am conducting a workshop about it. How can asana become a spiritual journey? So for me, it is like this for now. I look at asana as a gateway, not only into my muscle, but also into my mind.
Can you speak a little bit more on that journey, or is it beyond words? Or can you kind of qualify what is it you're journeying in towards? If you're looking at it as a proprioception, yeah, fair enough. And
okay,
then
so from neurological level, it is proprioception. Yeah. But when you shut your eyes and when your awareness seeps deeper in the asana, you open your awareness to the subtle anatomy. You can actually see your nadis. You can actually see your nadis, you can feel your nadis, and if you have proper regulation on your breath, I'm not even saying prana, breath, and you know how to apply the bandhas, you can literally be like a traffic police, modulating the flow of prana from this nadi to that nadi. Before the signal, sometimes you have these traffic police, they'll do like this, and the prana will go like this, stop, and then like this, prana will go like. You can actually, it's called prana nirodha or prana, sanchara. So you can, through physical movement, it's like I have a bottle of water. Yeah. This is a water of water with water in it. Now, if I move the bottle, the water will move too. So if I move the body through asana, then I can literally shake the prana inside my physical body. And that pranic modulation later on helps to become steady in dhyana. So it's not when you regulate your prana at the nadi level, it's not just that's not only the sake. The real reason is the real reason is to regulate the prana in such a way that when you sit for your dhyana, there is absolutely, all highways and all the roads are moving properly. The traffic is moving properly. There's no congestion in any roundabout, nowhere like that. Giving a traffic analogy.
Yeah. So, I was going to ask you, you've spoken really nicely on previous podcasts I've listened to about the aims of yoga and defining what is and what isn't yoga. And also in the current scheme of things when almost anything can be called yoga anymore, pretty much. So try and and if you say it can't be, then you're going to get into trouble. Well, that helps me in my life. So, we can call that yoga. How could you deny that we can't call things that are helpful yoga? But, from my perspective, and I know from your perspective, there's a classical definition of yoga. I'd like to hear you speak a little to.
The classical definition that I work with, Adam, is yoga is release from your attachment to suffering. It's the definition given in Bhagavad Gita chapter 6. And there can be no simpler definition of yoga than this. Chitta vritti nirodha and all are fine, but they are what you call activity goals. The real ultimate goal of yoga is what? Release from suffering. The whole Sankhya system, the whole Patanjali system is set for what? For release of suffering. So I work from this fundamental definition. And then there are working definitions, like shut the mind and all.
Could that be, yes. That definition could be quite low aiming though, in as much as it could be simply a pragmatic wish for more comfort in the world. Can we take it like that? Release from suffering being simply regulating your nervous system. People are quite into this these days. I regulate my nervous system with yoga. Therefore, yoga is a release. I'm doing yoga because yoga is a release from suffering and I'm experiencing more comfort on a daily level, on a material level. Therefore, I'm doing yoga.
Yeah. So the answer to this question is exactly the first chapter, first verse of Sankhya Karika, one of the main books of Sankhya philosophy. So it says we are giving Sankhya philosophy for removal of suffering. So then the counter question is, but there are already methods of suffering available, methods of release of suffering available. So then he says, yes, but they are not permanent methods. So what the system that we are giving you or the model that we are giving you is a permanent model. So if you look at the hierarchy of the approach, it is we are suffering and we are suffering at the level of the mind, which translates into suffering at the level of the body. Therefore, bring the mind and body in harmony and we will be released in suffering. So I work on this basic definition. Of course, there are other definitions like union with God and this and that, but I like to work with a very simple definition to accommodate as many diverse people as possible.
Yes, very sensible. But how far can you go? Anything that points towards that, can we include that in yoga, or does it have to be more classically based, as you were mentioning, the fairly well-known framework of Ashtanga, Patanjali, Ashtanga yoga? You've got your 8 limbs there, right? And can we call can we include, as you mentioned, including Chinese acupuncture in a yoga? Can that be yoga as well? And some shamanic journey, can that be yoga as well? Can we bring that all into the frying pan and mash it up?
Yeah. So look, different regions have different geographies have given their own ways of spiritual development. The spiritual systems or models or developmental approach that comes from Indian subcontinent is yoga. Yeah, that's why yoga is a generic term. There is yoga in Buddhism, there's yoga in Jainism, there's yoga in Sikhism, there's yoga in Hinduism. So if you really look at yoga, yoga comes from that geographical area of Indian subcontinent. So spiritual evolutionary methods to release from suffering, methods to regulate the mind, all these things that come from the region of Indian subcontinent can be called yoga. Yeah. So in my work, I work with the definition of release from suffering, and then I use methodologies that come purely from this geography. I'm very specific about it. I'm not going to take traditional Chinese medicine and call it yoga. I won't. For me, it's not fair. For me, though technically I can say, yes, that is also releasing suffering. But then I would also eat a bar of chocolate or eat ice cream and call it yoga. It's not fair like that. We have to honor the tradition. Same way, I would not go to China and practice Taoism and then call it yoga. I would not do that. Like bread. I give this example usually. Every region has bread. But doesn't mean I go to Middle East and eat their bread and call it chapati or paratha. Right? Paratha comes from a certain geography. Pita bread comes from a certain geography. So, ultimately it is bread. But then we need to honor the paratha, we need to honor the chapati, we need to honor the pita. Otherwise, tomorrow there will be no, pita will be chapati and chapati will be paratha, and that's not fair, at least for me. Acknowledging the roots, acknowledging the basic orientation is important. It's not just the roots. Also, every tradition comes from a certain context, certain preconceived notions, some certain fundamental beliefs. Like the whole, if you look at the entire Indian subcontinent that I talked about, everybody believes in, karma theory. So the Buddhists don't believe in self, but they believe in karma theory, a lasting self, in that matter. So, or cyclic nature of time. So every spirituality, not just yogic spirituality, every spirituality from all regions of the world have to be interpreted in context and taught in context.
Yeah. I think it's increasingly given a lot of attention, this idea of cultural appropriation these days, and taking yoga out of context. Do you feel that the way that yoga is taken in India is still different to what you see outside? Do you think there's a base understanding of a different approach that comes, as you mentioned, from a certain upbringing that you may have had, and certain kind of ways that you would have understood or taken it differently, where we see yoga these days purely in the West from an asana perspective, and asked about yoga philosophy? I would suggest that most people, I might like to hear their answers. It might be entertaining, because there's probably very little understanding of where it comes from, but I suppose the question is that okay? Can we just do yoga to the degree that it will kind of sort us out? You mentioned if you're sitting and breathing and focusing, then the nadis are doing something, and it's producing a further exploration that will having started, the seed will fructify, will grow. or is there a need to contextualize this more clearly and firmly within the source and the whole of what yoga is?
As a seeker, as a practitioner, no. But as a professional, yes. In India, there have been illiterate yogis who cannot read and write, who have sat quietly and reached heights of spiritual evolution. They never read any theory, they never read any Upanishad, nothing. But it's just that the natural soul impulse put them on this journey and they just went with it. Yeah. And later on, perhaps, they got the context and, things like that. So there is a certain spiritual impulse that drives you on the spiritual path to spiritual evolution, even if you don't know the theory. Like some ethical philosophers would say that the goodness is always there in a human. You don't have to be told to be empathetic towards somebody who is suffering. It comes naturally like that. But if one is a teacher, if somebody calls himself or herself a professional teacher, then they better know how to put things in context. Yeah, it's like another example would be, in some places in India, and I'm also sure, in a few hundred years ago, you just jumped into the pool, a river or a pond, and, moved your hands and learned how to swim. But if you're going to compete, then you have to know the breaststroke and butterfly stroke and the ergonomics, right? I mean, if you want, you can just jump into a pond and, know how to float on water. So it's like that.
I've seen people try that in India, and it doesn't necessarily work out well. I've seen them jump in, and they've had to be rescued at some point. They don't know how to swim. I've seen them just jump into the pool.
Yes.
The person can't swim. They're just thinking I'll just work it out there when I'm in there.
Yeah. So this is where the theoretical knowledge is essential if one is going to teach it. And then that knowledge is essential to be taught in context with consideration to the history, to the culture, in a complete senses. Like, for example, if you are a teacher, and even if you are teaching only asana, it is responsible on your part as a teacher to tell people that, look, yoga is huge, yoga has many modalities, but I'm teaching you asana, which is a part of a bigger picture. So you don't just replace the word asana with yoga and teach, So I see that is also happening in India, as they call it. There's a term in sociology called as reverse pizza effect.
Yes.
So I see that, and that's why I always make the difference yoga and yoga. In India, when people say I do yoga, they mean asana. And yoga, because the end, this is a little, the pronunciation.
Yes, okay. So they're taking the Western pronunciation of yoga.
Yeah, because in Sanskrit we have two A's.
Yoga.
And A. So the yoga, the end is yoga, a small a.
Yeah.
And English, A could be A or A. You see,
You're
so
right.
many people, yoga becomes yoga instead of yoga.
So people will refer to it like that. Right. You hear that.
Yeah, even in India, many people say, "Oh, are you a yoga teacher?"
Right. And then
when they say yoga teacher, they will mean that you are teaching asana or something.
Okay.
So the reverse pizza effect is happening. We too have classes to develop good shoulders and arms with asana for shoulders and all that.
I guess the obvious question I'd ask you, how have you seen things changing in India since you were growing up, in terms of the approach to yoga? Can you say anything about that at all, other than the obvious that, people are obviously using it more cosmetically and as a more of a fitness regime? Is there anything else that you could add to that?
In the popular culture in India, there's no difference between yoga of the West and yoga of India anymore. It's the same. It's the same. The same because of social media, and everybody's eager to hop on to the trends due to FOMO. So if something starts in the West or wherever, immediately it's taken here. So, like from a popular culture, from a pop culture point of view, there's no, there were few beer yoga workshops also have been conducted in India a few years ago. So, it's gone to that level too.
Yes.
But still, I would say, like I told you about my father and my mother, they were, in all practical senses, yogic seekers without even knowing that they are yogis. Yeah. So for me, yoga is a much broader term. If somebody is living in faith and deeper devotion and surrender, I will call them a yogi. Bhakti yogi, like the definition in Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. If somebody is just being a good person, following their day-to-day routines and, taking care of their things, they would fall into the zone of karma yogis. So my definition of yoga is broad, is inclusive, and that's how it was in ancient times. Though they may not have called it yoga, but still.
I don't know how much experience you've got with the West, but I've often got this impression that the exclusive taking of asana in the West is because there's not anything else that's framed around it. And I'm kind of assuming, in my experience of spending time in India, that most people understand that there's a number of practices in the day, and consistently over their lives that kind of give a framework to living, right? And with a Westerner, generally, there's no framework outside the asana practice. So the asana practice becomes tantamount to everything, because there's no other context. And I don't know whether I'm generalizing to say that, this exclusivity to the asana practice is through a lack of other framework around what's happening. I mean, would you agree with the fact that there's still, even in modern India, more opportunity to have a greater context?
Absolutely. You're absolutely on point on this, because somewhere yoga went to the West or became popular in the West as a physical modality. And once after physical modality, then what? I remember a few years ago, I was doing a workshop, and one participant came and said, "I'm a senior teacher. I've been teaching for the last 20 years." I said, "Great." And after my workshop, she just came to me crying, and I did not say anything extra. I just told them about basic spiritual basis of what we do, all the practices. And she came to me crying and she said, "I've been teaching yoga for 20 years. Why no one told this to me? Why no one told this to me?" And then suddenly she was all angry about her teachers and all that. And I said, "You don't have to be angry on your teachers. They taught you what they taught you. But now that you know," she was like, "I missed out on last 20 years. If I knew this broader perspective, I could have started off early. I would have had an edge." But yeah, I mean, yeah. So yes, you're absolutely on point. Because in India, whichever yoga you practice, karma yoga, you see Bhagavad Gita, karma yoga, chapter 3, 4, 5, there's a complete structure. Bhakti yoga, the whole Bhakti lineage since last 1500 years is a complete structure. So the West is picking it up in patches. I'll tell you how. In last 10 years, Adam, you've been in the industry since a long time. So this whole community narrative just started in last 8-10 years, right? Let's have a community, and then circles and, Sangha and all this has become popular in just last 1 decade. But if you look traditionally, I just put up a post yesterday on my Instagram about women's circles have been happening in India for hundreds of years. Not to put down the current women's circle, but this is exactly on point of what you were saying, that in Indic tradition, you enter a certain yogic path, and then suddenly there is a support of the guru, support of the sangha. You have the required scriptures, you have the required temples. So there is an entire system that holds you on your path, and you always feel supported. There'll be no, okay, I've mastered these difficult asanas. Now what do I do? Okay, I can hold my breath for 4 minutes. Now what? No. Yeah, you will find your teacher, you'll find your, as they say, guru bandhus, or, fellow guru disciples. And then you move like a tribe, as they say.
Yeah. What do you say? What do you say the role of a teacher is then? And is the teacher a guru? I mean, did you relate to your teachers as a guru? What do you think about the role of the modern teacher? And can we still have gurus? Is it still something that we can, is it a practical?
That's a huge topic, but it's a very, very valid topic. There are teachers, and then there are gurus. Yeah, like in India, there are 6-7 layers of teachers, like Acharya. Acharya will just teach you.
Yeah.
Okay. A guru may not teach you. So a guru means a teacher. Like, for example, when we went to school, we used to call our class teacher a guru. So in India, it doesn't always have to be spiritual. Like somebody's music teacher is their guru. Somebody's art teacher will be their guru. So in India, it just becomes a part of the culture. Guru is not a term reserved specifically only for a spiritual teacher, per se. So there are different levels of teachers. Some teachers will just teach you theoretically and not help you at all. Some teachers may not teach you, but guide you. Some teachers will guide you, but not give you your sadhana, your practice. Some teachers will give you your practice, but not give a support system. So it really depends on what kind of teacher you meet. But if you ask me personally, I really feel it is important to find your teacher. Okay. Sometimes not even for the knowledge that the teacher gives, but for a support system. If you ask me, I feel the role of the teacher is more about offering a support system than disseminating knowledge. Yeah. So I feel, perhaps I'm old-fashioned, but I feel that you need a teacher, and after a while you need a guru. It's like in the most common senses. Like nowadays, many people have therapists, and it's great. So what does in the Indian context you would call a therapist your guru? Why?
Right.
Because the therapist may not teach you, but it's guiding you, holding hands through the difficulties of your life. Yeah? There are so many gurus in India who don't teach anything, nothing, but they have all the answers. Okay, so they have the answers to your existential questions, but they may not sit. Okay, chapter number 1. They will not start like that. So I feel that we all need teachers or gurus, but the gurus and teachers will come. It's not a one-way street. You have to, you call the guru according to your merit and your capability. So it's a two-way street. It's not a guru-disciple relationship is not a one-way street. It's always
Yes. Along those lines, how do you assess? You mentioned the importance, a number of times, in fact, I've heard you say this, about finding the teacher that's right for you.
Yeah.
That's a really tricky thing. How do you assess? How do you assess the teacher? How do you find?
By trial and error, Adam.
Yeah, right. Simply by going around and seeing.
By going around, by failing, by rejecting, by being rejected. It's exactly like, how do you find your life partner? It's exactly like that. And
so you need to put some effort into it. You don't just settle on the
You have to put an effort, And the reason I gave an example of life partner, somebody you want to grow old with, why? Because it's a lasting commitment.
Right.
You see, you can, it's like that.
Not in the current
of
terms,
commitment is important.
That's how it should be, right? I mean,
ideally, that's how it should be.
Necessarily speaking to the current zeitgeist, where people will say, many teachers, who's your teacher in yoga? Well, I have this person and this person and this person, and they taught me this, right? If you look at a yoga teacher bio currently, it's like, I was taught, that's 10 different teachers mentioned there.
See, it's like this, Adam. For common cold, you can go to any general practitioner. You see, but when you have a surgery to be done on your body, you will look for a good surgeon. You see, and if you have a life-threatening disease, you will go to any corner of the world to be healed by that doctor. You see, so it's the depth of your awareness of how tightly you're stuck in avidya.
Yeah, the depth of your understanding of what kind of trouble you're in.
Yeah,
or how much you think you are. I mean, along those lines, you mentioned I liked it, the release of suffering being a very sensible and reasonable definition of yoga. That's the aim. Yeah. So and you mentioned a little bit about methodology. So can you kind of like talk a little bit more about methodologies towards that and how that kind of qualify that term a little bit more. What are we doing? How do we do that? And how do we, obviously Patanjali is looking at restraint of the senses. Is this? I mean, you're talking about going off into the. I don't know where you're going. I was going to say Himalayas, but
silence.
Wherever you're going, in silence in Morna for a number of months. I mean, what kind of modalities are you suggesting or are you teaching towards this end of suffering? How's your journey been with this?
Yeah, as a practitioner, my journey is focused on two things: silence and surrender. As a teacher, my journey is focused on, my teaching is focused on simplification, deepening of faith, and creation of patience. Okay, now coming to my own movement, my own growth, silence and surrender. I went to 100 places and I finally deducted that these two things is what I need now in my life. And these two things are enough. They are enough for me. So the whole focus for my spirituality is cultivating silence, not just by shutting doors and windows, but ultimately the silence is noble silence of the mind. How my mind stays quiet, stays centered, stays regulated in different circumstances that I navigate. And surrender. Surrender for me is an extremely important component of my own spirituality. Most important. Yeah, it was about faith 10 years ago, but now I see that my focus on faith is moving more into surrender.
How is that different then?
Faith matures into surrender.
Okay.
Yeah. So the visual analogy I give is children sitting in the back seat of the car and parents are driving them to vacation. Kids don't care where they are going, when they will reach, how expensive the vacation is, which hotel they will stay at. The kids just want to have fun. Yeah, they're going on vacation. They are enjoying. They don't have to drive. They don't have to pay the gas bills. Nothing is going out of their pocket. For me, that is the mindset of a yogi who has surrendered. I'm not saying I have surrendered, but that's an attempt. It's an attempt. No matter how hard the knocks of life knock me down, I want to get up and keep moving.
Yeah, I was going to say, how does that bear out in daily life? And this idea of surrender.
Bear out in daily life.
Yeah.
You learn from difficulties, and you are grateful for the positives, and you learn from the negatives, and you are humbled by both positives and negatives. And that's how you move on. And life is very simple, Adam, but our mind is very complicated.
And why is the surrender? You still haven't said why the surrender is different to faith, which I'm kind of interested in as well. How has faith matured into surrender? I like this.
Faith is basically belief in something or someone. Yeah, faith is belief in something or someone. And surrender is literally surrender. I mean, that's a beautiful word. It's a dropping your so-called free will based on the strength of that belief. Yeah, that's why I said faith matures into surrender. The belief in something. Let's say I believe in Shiva. Let's say, okay, an example. My faith in Shiva increases so much that after a while, Shiva, I am yours, my life is yours, whatever you give me is yours, whatever you take from me is yours, I don't care. I just want to be with you in my mind and my heart. This is how the bhaktas live. This is how they will always say.
Is there a religious kind of feeling to the surrender then?
It could be religious.
For you? For you?
For me?
Yeah.
Depends, Adam, how you define religion. Yeah. But for me, my whole and soul is my guru, and then my surrender is to my guru. I'm not much into gods and deities and icons. Yeah, and I keep it simple. I really try to keep it simple. And that's it, really. That's it. So whatever happens, like the Krishna Bhaktas would say that whatever happens is Krishna's will. Whatever happens in my life is Krishna's will.
Yeah.
So there's no strife. You do what you have to, okay? It's not like you give up everything.
Yeah. Does the surrender necessarily predicate the fact that you have to have a kind of a non-material view of life? Does the surrender necessarily imply that life has to be transcendental, right? Because I try as much as I can to kind of to kind of allow yoga to be a belief system that doesn't need the belief of reincarnation, but it doesn't really function unless there's another world, unless there's more than one life. Really, it doesn't really work out. Right.
But you don't have to. It is predicated upon what you said, but you don't have to. Our one single life is complicated enough to include multiple past lives in it. Now, if I look at my infancy, it's a life cycle in itself. If I look at my teenage, it's a life cycle in itself. Literally, I'm not the same person that went to my first yoga class at the age of 9. I'm literally not. Hardly 0.5% of me is the same, So believing in the whole transmigration of soul and everything will put a lot of things in context. But I would not say I've explained the theory of karmas to people who don't believe in past life and don't want to believe in next life and don't want to believe in circularity of time. It doesn't have to be that way. It's just, what is our project as yogis? What is our project as yogis? It's simple. Calm that mind down. If traditional yoga has to be summarized in one single sentence, that would be calm down that mind. Calm down that mind in every situation. Patanjali calls it ekagrachit.
Yeah.
Only when the mind is calm, quiet, and centered, you will know the transcendental aspect of you.
I kind of still think that the resolution has to lie elsewhere, like in the Gita, right? The resolution that Krishna offers is not like, oh, you can get involved in this war, Arjuna, and it'll work out, because it's a civil war. Like, it's never going to work out, and it's a metaphor for for the kind of untractability of material life, right? Like you're ensconced in the gunas, right? Like material life can, in the yoga parlance, in yoga, that can never be resolved adequately.
No.
Right. In this
Material life will never be resolved because it is not supposed to be resolved. Material life, that's why there was a philosopher called Kierkegaard, Soren Kierkegaard, and his whole philosophy is called philosophy of despair. He was one of the birthing fathers of existentialism. The same, Krishna says the same thing. Krishna calls the world, this material world, as anitya. Anitya means uncertain. And because it is uncertain, it will always trigger us. Because in the depths of our heart and our mind, what do we need? We need some stability. We need some assurance. We need some security. The whole pandemic, this term called VUCA, VUCA came. VUCA, volatile, uncertain. It's a mnemonic.
That, right? Okay, right. Yeah.
Just Google it. VUCA world, VUCA. Okay, and VUCA means volatile and uncertain. So the material world is uncertain because nothing is fixed, nothing is assured. But our human mind is, at the base of it, highly anxious. So internally, it's anxiety. Externally, it's uncertainty. So if you look at a human person, that poor human person, all of us included, is an anxious nervous system trying to grapple through an uncertain life. You see how difficult that task is.
I think that the person just trying to recognize the consistency, because the consistency is inside, right? And the trouble is, if we weren't consistent internally, then it wouldn't be a problem. But there's two different states going on. One is the outside world that's inconsistent, and one is the inside world that's always consistent. And there's no harmony between the two, right? We're looking
inside
for that,
word means which word?
I think the sense of ultimate self, the sense of consciousness, is always the same. It's not changing.
Ultimate self is not at all an issue. You see, ultimate self, according to the yogi philosophy, is never disturbed. Ultimate self is not an issue. It's always perfect. We are not wanting to become the ultimate self. We are already it.
But we're looking for it outside. The trouble is looking for it outside.
Yes.
You never find it. You never find it outside.
Yeah, because it is so thickly enveloped by our avidya. We are so caught up with the mind that it's like now if somebody, we are talking and suddenly there's some music starts playing behind you, you will not be able to hear me. It's exactly that. And that's why in Bhagavad Gita chapter number 5, Krishna says that avidya is because, ajnanena avritam jnanam tena muhyati jantava, means the ajnana, the non-knowledge has literally enveloped us, and because of that we are deluded. That's it. So it's just about, it sounds simple and it takes lifetimes, but just about literally pulling away the curtain and just looking that it was always bright outside of you. It was always bright. Sun was always shining, but we chose to sit inside our house with curtains drawn. And that's why surrender here, dropping and simplification. This is what is my conclusion till now.
Yeah.
That's it, drop. Just try to uncomplicate life. That's why my focus in the last 1.5 years is to unyoga myself, my students, and as much as possible, because what happens is, in a way, our spiritual journey is about coming out from all the identities. But then we realize that yoga teacher is one very, very important identity that we got stuck in.
And the relationship of the student to that teacher, not only for the teacher, but also for the student to kind of contextualize their journey in relationship to that other. Finally, Prashad, I would kind of like to ask you how you bring that kind of into your classes, I suppose. Like if someone's there, like, for our listeners as well, if someone's kind of there just thinking, well, I'm doing this asana, and this makes me calm, it makes me relax, and I really like it, and I don't really know, I don't really like to read much, for many people these days, they don't really want to read any books, they don't really, I can't understand that Yoga Sutras very well, and very complicated. How would you recommend? Like, what kind of gateways do you recommend for people to kind of bring some further exploration or deeper aspects to their daily asana? It's going to be asana, generally speaking, practices.
Specifically with asana practice, I would suggest that number one, focus on your breath more than your posture.
Okay.
Let your breath be the guide to how deep you should go in the posture, not your muscle. Because our brain talks to us through our breath. So this is where the flip comes. Yeah. Don't look at the muscle. Don't look at the shape. Don't look at how this posture, how my teacher did this posture. No. Be with your breath and allow the muscle to stretch itself wherever it goes. Even neurologically, that will help you more to relax in the muscle rather than frantically wanting to enter into a posture. This is number one. Number two, patience. While teaching asana, I always tell the students that, look, this is the only body you will have. So just be patient. Yeah. I mean, just because you can do this posture so fantastically doesn't mean you become a good human. This is just a physical thing. Your muscles have been limited for a long time. So give it time. Give it time. You sit for 8 hours at your work on a chair. Now you cannot come to my class and feel like a person who's made up of Play-Doh. So somewhere also, I think, in today's performative culture of asana, teacher has more responsibility of assuring than teaching. The teacher has more role to play. It's okay. You're there, no problem. We will reach there by March. You don't have to reach there today. Yeah, because now if the teacher's like, that's it, come on, by now you should have reached the toes. We are literally, the students are malleable. We are creating the students. So I really feel the teacher's role, especially post-pandemic, where almost, let's be honest, everybody has mental issues. Yeah, everybody has mental health issues. So who is coming to the class? It's not just the body. It's a body which is driven by a mind with mental health issues. So I think somewhere post-pandemic, a teacher's role has changed a lot. It's not just about giving out instructions and observing. It has become giving out instructions, assuring, supporting. So the teacher, in a way, has to develop qualities like being empathetic, being considerate. The teacher themselves has to let go of all the preconditioned idea of the posture has to be like that. And if I'm not in a posture like this, I'm not a good enough yogi. So it's really reworking from the side of the teacher and the student.
Yeah. Nicely put. I mean, especially as I've seen quite kind of pedagogic and dictatorial kind of teaching methodology in India, of the pushing and the forcing kind of type, and in the West, we generally a little bit wrap ourselves up in cotton wool. On the other side, a little bit too much, sometimes, this kind of, but on the other side, I think we've seen some pretty strict kind of approaches to yoga and traditional Indian teaching. So
yeah, but not all, Adam. I mean, there are many schools.
Yes,
there are many schools who don't really care about the depth of your asana. There are many schools and old schools. Yeah, they do the asanas with the focus on the mind, not really the body. So,
just for out of interest, where are you doing your retreats? And just to finish off now, I'm going to say anything about these retreats that you're doing every year.
I will finally start traveling from next year.
Okay.
Because I used to teach in around 10, 12 countries every year pre-pandemic, but now an Indian passport is not really a strong passport, so I have to restart standing in line and long waiting for visas and everything. So I'm looking, right now nothing is planned, but I'm looking for some travel in 2023. And I have focused more now since pre-pandemic days on something that I call meditation facilitator training, to give a comprehensive idea of meditation and how we can go into it and be it. So I want to do some meditation facilitation trainings, and I'll see how it goes. Nothing planned as yet.
Okay. Well, all that remains is for me to say thank you. It's been a wonderful chance to meet you and talk to you. And please look at Prashad's social media. It's really, really, really great. Really some very, very good articles on there. And we'll link all the links to Prashad and what he's doing below in the on the YouTube and the podcast. So I hope you enjoy this. Thanks again, Prashad.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.